Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bath North East Somerset's Cabinet meeting dated the 8th of February. Just remind everybody to switch off their mobile phones or at least put them to silent, please, before we start. Let's make the following announcement to reference webcasting. This Cabinet meeting is being filmed and the recording will be available on the Council's website. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Anybody speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator. And we'll start off by introducing members of the Cabinet, and we'll go around. Councillor McCabe first, please.
Trying to catch me unawares. Councillor Matt McCabe, I'm the Councillor for Bath Avon South Ward and the Cabinet Member for the Built Environment, Housing Services and Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Roper.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Roper, Councillor for Kingsmead Ward and Cabinet Member for Economic and Cultural Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Elliott.
Good evening, Mark Elliott. I'm Ward Member for Lansdowne and Cabinet Member for Resources.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Wood.
Dave Wood, Councillor for Mendip Ward and Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Council Priorities and Delivery.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Rigby.
Evening, everybody. Amanda Rigby, Ward Councillor for Bathwick and Cabinet Member for Highways.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor May.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul May, Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, and I represent the wards of Pensford and Whitchurch Village on the outskirts of Bristol.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Bourne.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Alison Bourne. I'm the Ward Member for Widcombe and Lincoln, and I am the Cabinet Lead for Adult Services and Public Health.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Warren.
Sarah Warren, Councillor for Bath Avon North Ward and Cabinet Lead for Climate Emergency and Sustainable Transport.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll just ask Democratic Services to read out the emergency evacuation procedure.
If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. There is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people in the corridor outside the Council Chamber Public Gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as a safe refuge where persons needing assistance should assemble.
Thank you, Marie. Apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Tim Ball.
Thank you, Marie. We wish Tim a speedy recovery as well. Declarations of interest.
I have a family member in receipt of an EHCP.
Excellent. I think, Marie, you're going to read out a genuine...
Yeah, just want to say, for the Cabinet Budget and Council Tax item, the monitoring officer has issued a specific dispensation for Councillor Sarah Warren, who has a family member in receipt of an education, health and care plan, and therefore has an interest in these items to enable her to take part in the debate and vote. And he has also issued a general dispensation on this item for all councillors who pay council tax and therefore had an interest in these items to enable them to take part in the debate and vote.
Thank you, Marie. Any other declaration of interest from the floor? No? OK, moving on. Questions from the public and councillors. We have received 14 questions from councillors and 36 questions from members of the public. Each councillor has an ability to ask a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. So do any councillors present have any supplementary questions? Councillor Moss.
Yes, supplementary to my question about to Councillor Amanda Rigby about roads in Westfield and Radstock. Amanda, would you agree that considering how fragile traffic flow is in the Radstock and Westfield area, that extra consideration should be given when there is more than one major traffic works taking place in the area?
Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, happy to answer that, Councillor Moss. As you know, we did have one planned bit of work. However, we would never aim to have 2 major bits of work, but we cannot predict whether there's going to be an emergency. People work through the night in order to try and get it done as quickly as possible. You are right that having 2 pieces of work going on nearby is not optimal, and it's certainly nothing that we would ever plan to do.
Thank you, sir. Second supplementary, Councillor Moss, or...
No,
Okay, splendid. So we can't do much about utility companies sometimes digging up the road. Right, moving on. Item 7, statements and petitions from the public and councillors. I believe we'll start with Cara Erickson. Yes, Ms. Erickson. So you've got 3 minutes and we'll start whenever you're ready. You're aware of the light system as well. I'll give you a clue. When it goes amber, you've got a minute left.
It's that one there?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm Kari Erickson. I live in Lansdowne, and I will be part of the new livable neighborhood scheme. As designed, it will prevent me from accessing my own home in the way that I do every single day when I collect my children from school, when I take them to their local surgery, which I did today. All 3 of them had to go. And when I generally run errands, buy groceries, and try to live my life in peace and harmony without bothering anybody. I do not feel I was really consulted on the way that the scheme would develop, although I was aware it was in the works. Certainly I wasn't consulted the way I was when I lived in Hackney and they developed the cycle superhighway. That was very much done in tandem with the public in a way I don't feel that the scheme was done. Regardless of that, when I first moved to Bath, I headed up a residents association on my street. So I was aware of the conversations about traffic because it very quickly became clear to me that the sole aim of most of the residents associations in my area was to reduce traffic coming into Lansdowne. And, I was very frank with people right from the beginning that as a mother of 3 children and a busy person, I use my car to access my home most of the time. I love walking into town. I get the bus, back up when it's convenient, but a lot of times it isn't convenient. And certainly on a day-to-day basis with 3 young kids, it's not convenient to do this. And those conversations became unfruitful and at times even dismissive. I remember one conversation where people were decrying car-centric parents. I don't know what a car-centric parent is. I know that parents need cars, even if we wish we don't. I can tell you as an American driving in Bath all the time, I wish I didn't have to drive. It's not my favorite thing to do, but this is my life, and I accept that this is what it is right now. It was one of the reasons I ended up stepping away from doing that because I just found it not a good use of my time in the end. And when this scheme was, I became aware of it, which was after, I guess it was already under consideration. I also became aware that numerous residents around me also voiced concerns that they would also not be able to access their own homes and have to drive around. Of course, I have access to my own home, but I'll have to drive all the way over to Lansdowne through town at peak traffic time with my kids. And other people also don't like this. And when I was speaking to some of the people who work at the surgery, they told me they also signed statements about this. And the way that I feel, honestly, I feel at the moment that an agenda to, reduce emissions, reduce traffic, whatever it is specifically, my lifestyle as someone who is that for late? I'm all right. Okay. Okay, great. Well, I'll conclude by saying this. I was telling a friend of mine this who does not have kids, and she said, yeah, see, this is one of the reasons I don't want to have children, because the way mothers are treated and their concerns are considered in society is just, quite frankly, disgusting. And it really floored me, but I understand why she said that.
Okay. But thank you, Ms. Erickson, for your statement. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I know you've got childcare to go to.
Yes, I do. I have to go back. Yeah. So are there no questions? I haven't done this in a while.
No, that's all.
Am I needed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Ms. Page. No? Okay. We'll move on to Mr. Allen. Hello.
Talking about English over here again, we've got it on buildings. So I'm waiting to hear back from your council to see what's going on about the pavilion and Bath. So we've got a lot of old buildings being destroyed. If you go to the Marlborough Taverns opposite the Marlborough Taverns, you've got a wall and some railings. So that building, not the building, the wall is coming down because of the ivy. If we don't sort something out now, we're going to lose the ecosystem. So I'm not sure if the councils are aware of the government subsidies that goes to farmers to not cut English ivy off the trees. If you are aware of this, then surely it should be something done. So farmers receive a lot of money from the government to not cut the trees down, not cut the ivy down. So once the tree comes down, they got to hire in a tree surgeon. All your trees, young trees that you're planting, we younger generation ain't got 30 to 50 years to wait for clean air. With the ecosystem, all the ancient hedgerows and the trees are being destroyed by this invasive parasite. I don't understand why nobody gives a toss. Excuse my French. I just see that you're brushing it under the carpet, the government brushes it under the carpet, and they'd rather pay everyone a load of money to keep it stum. It's not right. That's why I'm enough on the English ivy anyway, so I'm not on another tough topic. Low traffic neighbourhoods. Are you on about turning Bath into a 15-minute city like Liverpool, Birmingham? So if you live in one part of Liverpool, you can't travel if it takes more than 15 minutes. So your low traffic neighbourhoods are part of this, yeah? Cashless society. As is going cashless, right? A lot of places in Bath don't take cash even though it's legal tender. Where's it going?
Is that the end of the statement, Mr. Allen? Yeah.
What's that?
Is that the end of the statement?
Yeah, that's the end.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure everything there was 100% accurate, but thank you very much for your statement. We appreciate it. We're moving on. Rowan Watson, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So I'm speaking to you on behalf of Julian House, a local charity providing life-changing and life-saving support for vulnerable people in Baines, and as chair of the Baines Homelessness Partnership. All the organisations in the partnership, including Julian House, will be impacted by proposed funding cuts. We are deeply concerned about the disproportionate 34% cut to the housing-related support budget that has been proposed. We know that the Council's funding settlement was not adequate, but such a drastic reduction would be akin to pulling the rug out from under the most vulnerable people in our community, those without a place to call home. Its consequences would be profound, far-reaching, and ultimately counterproductive. The third sector contracted services that are delivered in Baines are drastically underfunded already. With no uplift to some of the contracts for nearly a decade, we are already subsidising services now. This is entirely unsustainable and means that any cuts to funding are likely to result in services closing at a time when levels of homelessness are soaring and people need them the most. We know from years of experience that investing in housing-related support saves money in the long run. Every person helped off the streets is one less critical case for the Baines Housing Option Team. Adult social care, emergency services, the criminal justice and health, to name a few. A 34% cut would be a false economy, leading to a rise in those very costs to the local authority. The local authority's temporary accommodation spend would significantly rise without some of the 178 off-the-streets beds and supported housing beds currently available to homeless people. National campaigning organisation Crisis has found that people sleeping on the streets are almost 17 times more likely to have been victims of violence. More than 1 in 3 people sleeping rough have been deliberately hit or kicked or experienced some other form of violence whilst homeless. Homeless people are over 9 times more likely to take their own life than the general population. The average death for people experiencing homelessness is 46 for men and 42 for women. These are not just statistics. These are local people accessing local services. These are your constituents of Bath and North East Somerset. We believe and practice collaboration in finding solutions together. The pandemic showed us the strength of our relationships and ability to work efficiently together. With resources from Baines Council, over a few days we worked together and got everyone in, meeting the government's directive and leaving a lasting legacy on the supported housing pathway. It is positive that we have more time, that you have listened to this part of our request. However, we have heard no change to the devastating 34% proposed cut to funding, and we urge you to reconsider. Together with the Baines Homeless Partnership, we'll develop a strategic plan with Baines Council officers that minimises harm and maximises efficiency, and we urge you to reconsider.
Mr. Wood, can I ask you to sum up? Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to hand over to, we've got two service users here. Matt's just come, who's just going to observe, and Becky is going to talk to the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for your statement. I couldn't agree more that preventative services has been drastically underfunded for far too long, generally. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I've got Matthew's not going to speak, but Becky's going to speak. Is that correct? Okay, no problem. So straight to you, Becky. You've got 3 minutes. Start whenever you're ready. Okay, thank you. That's not vintage equipment. You're okay. That's not Georgian. You're all right.
Okay. I'm Rebecca, and I've lived on a boat in this area for 12 years. Liveaboard boaters are probably one of the most diverse communities you'll find, providing so much for Bath and hundreds of very low-cost, low-impact dwellings. Amongst us are some of the most vulnerable people in Bath. Even for the more privileged of us, there are barriers to vital services when you don't have an address. You can't even get help from 111 without a postcode. I witnessed a woman being hit repeatedly by her partner in her boat, but I couldn't get the police out without a postcode and had to intervene myself. Julian House helped people to access the Household Support Fund, which can help with fuel and food costs in the winter. This is something that's very difficult to get if you don't have proof of residence. Without this, people could freeze or die from black mould. It's not uncommon for boats to catch fire and burn down. Julian House can help us access smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors and safety advice. Boaters and travellers have a considerably lower life expectancy than the rest of the population. Julian House help you to access doctors and get prescriptions. During the pandemic, they organised a vaccine boat so that people could be protected. The Canal and River Trust are making the terms of our licence increasingly strict, confusing and difficult to meet. We are not offered the same rights of protection as those living in a house. There are people who can't read and write or don't have computers or have mental health problems that hinder them from taking on a massive organisation. Julian House can help you fill in the forms or take on the bureaucracy that's involved in tackling CRT in order to keep your home. I remember a vulnerable woman with epilepsy had been renting a boat in Bath, but her landlord hadn't paid the licence. The Canal and River Trust came and removed the woman from her home and took the boat away. She was left standing there with no support and nowhere to go. She went on to have a number of seizures caused by the stress and presented at Julian House that evening, naked and in a very confused state. Julian House helped people access food banks, benefits, grants for vital repairs, get subsidised vet care, have a shower. So often they are able to help you with a few phone calls or a quick meeting. It is simple and effective, and it is to provide things that every single one of you take for granted. Healthcare, a doctor's, a prescription, a vaccine, fire safety, food, heating and a roof over your head. All things that can mean the difference between life or death. And what happens if we don't get these things? More people in tents, more people in shop doorways, more people in A&E and Hillview, and more people having paupers' funerals. If I can't persuade you to vote with your hearts to help the most vulnerable people in your community that aren't so different from you, then you must see that you won't save any money by cutting these services. If you vote to save this service, you save many people's lives and help improve the quality of life and opportunities for so many more. There's no social housing or cheap rent for us in the area. There's nowhere else for us to go.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you for a very passionate statement. I'll let you go over because I gave you some of Matt's time.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much for your statement, though. Thank you. Becky Brooks, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Becky Brooks. I'm the director at Bath and North East Somerset Third Sector Group. As the infrastructure organisation supporting and advocating for the third sector in Baines, 3SG is extremely concerned about the proposed savings to the budget for both children's services and adult community contracts. The details of the required savings provided by the Council has been limited and has left the sector feeling insecure and vulnerable with a lack of certainty around future provision. Third sector organisations across Baines support tens of thousands of the most vulnerable people and employ thousands of staff, many of whom are local citizens contributing to the local ecosystem. This is now at risk. It is a challenge for the sector to make any meaningful plans for 24-25. Organisations do not know whether they can continue to provide essential services and whether they are able to commit to employing or retaining staff. The wider impact of these savings on sector partners such as primary care and mental health trusts cannot be overestimated. Service providers who currently rely on an end-to-end care and support pathway in order to support people to stay healthy and well and live their best lives in their community. The core values of the Council and ICB, focusing on the wider determinants of health and early intervention prevention, will be significantly undermined by this proposal if we lose these vital services. Third sector in Baines employs skilled, dedicated individuals who provide essential, cost-effective community provision which supports statutory services. Without a strong third sector, these systems will fall down, and they are already under extreme pressure. The sector is continually asked and has been asked to do more for less for an unsustainable period of time. One of the challenges is the many years of zero or significantly below inflation contract uplifts, resulting in significant real-term cuts in funding. This lack of inflationary uplift is not something our statutory partners will be able to sustain. If organisations are to keep up with the national living wage, for example, then that increase alone is around 40% since HCRG contracts began. With both the cost of living and need rising, it is essential that the third sector is invested in, and so easing pressure on local authorities on primary care and emergency services. We are fully aware of the financial challenges the Council faces. However, we implore decision makers to provide more information on these proposals and to actively involve the sector in such decisions. Third sector partners need to be at the table rather than have decisions made for them. The sector knows its services can work with Council colleagues to develop creative solutions which will ensure minimum disruption, remove service duplication, reduce the risk of job losses and the potential loss of services, which will ultimately increase the Council and statutory sector's costs. Cutting discretionary spending will only generate long-term cost. The third sector stepped in to support the Council to deliver in ways it could not during the pandemic. These cuts should not be the thanks that it gets. It's time to be brave and think creatively to ensure Baines has a strong third sector for years to come. An article in The Guardian last week spoke about the risk of local authorities cutting the third sector. Perhaps the Council could be the one to break the mould and ensure that it works with the sector as equal partners to deliver the best for residents in Baines, because that, after all, is what we all want.
Thank you, Becky. Kate Morton, next, please.
There's going to be a theme here. Tell you that. So I'm here today. I'm the Chief Executive of Bathmind, but I'm also the Chair of Baines Third Sector Infrastructure Organisation, 3SG. Bathmind is a significant local independent provider of mental health and wellbeing services in Baines for people over 16 years old. We provide interventions for over 6,000 people every year across that care and support pathway, from preventative wellbeing services all the way through to crisis alternatives. And I want to share my reflections and concerns about the Council's budget saving process. So to date, there's not been any detail around the proposed savings. It's leaving uncertainty around future provision for us, our ability to set our budget, to plan long term, and indeed questioning whether we'd be able to continue some of our essential services. We work closely with colleagues across ICB and Baines Council to helping to prioritise the wider determinants, the strategy and the provision of early intervention and prevention services. And these values that we hold very dearly with our Council and ICB colleagues will be significantly undermined if these vital services are cut. As a third sector employer, we employed skilled, trained and dedicated individuals, and many of whom are local residents contributing to the local system, and we provide essential services that underpins and bolsters the statutory sector provision. The broad reach that we have and our impact cannot be underestimated, and without us there will be a gaping hole in the mental health support across Baines, and with a resulting increase in the burden to the statutory sector, and the sector we know which is already incredibly challenged. As you've heard, the years of zero or significantly below inflation uplift for the time of the contract with our HCRG colleagues has resulted in significant cuts in real terms. We estimate that is looking at about 26%, and it's been accompanied by an increase in workload. It is essential that we're invested in to ease the pressure on local authorities, on our primary care and emergency service colleagues. Bath Mind are very aware of the challenges that you as a council are facing, and we really want to urge you to work with us, for us to be at the table and develop those creative solutions collaboratively so we can ensure that minimum disruption, and we can demonstrate our impact, our value for money, and we can make a real difference to people's lives. The broad range of services that we provide demonstrates exceptional value for money. We're willing and able to collaborate and support with people living in our communities through these really difficult times. Please let us be bold and brave together.
Thank you very much, Kate. Well, I appreciate your statement, and I give you my promise that we will work collaboratively with all organisations in this process. David Ridgewell.
Well, this is that time of year when we talk about the transport levy from Bath and North East Somerset, Bristol City Council and South Gloucestershire under the WECA Act, which effectively is a requirement for this local authority to passport money to the combined authority for public transport services. In a service, it's actually a joint service between Act of Parliament, between Baines and WECA to provide public bus services. As we know, we have some improvements in the bus network, and in fact we're going to see more on the 15th. If you live in Westfield, Radstock, Midsummer, North, or Peasdown, and you're travelling down towards Wales, or if you're travelling from Bristol through Whitchurch and Pensford, you've got extra buses to Bridgewater and Taunton, which is all good news from WECA. But where we really are hit is the areas of social justice, social inclusion, the poorest people in Radstock and Midsummer not having access to public bus services. Heartbreaking stories of elderly people who live in Westfield and Radstock who absolutely have no access to a bus. I know the Mayor's going to visit one of them. And we've also got the same situation between Trowbridge and Freshford and Bath, where those villages could lose their service 94, which is funded partly with Wiltshire. And then we've also now got the Traffic Commissioner who's turned around and said that we have to limit Westlink back to 20 minutes, and he's serious about taking action against the ambulance company that presently runs Westlink. So that has got to be, that whole contract's got to be redrawn and possibly re-let by the West of England Mayor in conjunction with the local authorities. It's history, so it's not a blame game, it's history, the ambulance contract. That's EZIC Medical and Westlink. But nevertheless, I'm fearful of those residents and villages that rely on Westlink and sorting out a service, and we need to sort out a service, so there needs to be quite a bit of work between the combined authority and Baines on how we go forward. Now, one option for, and we've checked the lawfulness of this, is that Baines could contract bus services with Somerset Council. 414 would be an example to get to sort the 82 area out. 94 could be contracted with Wiltshire. Gloucestershire and South Gloucester gone into contracting together, so they're letting their bus services together rather than going through the WECA transport levy process. And that is lawful, that is absolutely lawful in terms of law. But we've got to provide rural public transport. We cannot leave areas of the Chew Valley without bus services. We cannot leave Radstock, Midsummer Norton. We've got parts of Keynsham where we need to redirect the 522 through the Shanbag Estate. But this all takes time and work, and the levy is part of the negotiations. It should be going on. Now, franchising's fine, but it's 5 years away, whereas the levy and the BSIP, or Bus Service Improvement Plan, are now, and we have to resubmit that Bus Service Improvement Plan with our supported network for the 12th of June to the Secretary of State, whichever government's in power. So my plea tonight is to make sure we actually maintain bus services, and maintain the bus services in the rural areas, and work with WECA and Somerset and Wiltshire to find a way forward to keep those people from being isolated and able to access jobs, services, hospital, healthcare and basic food shopping. So social needs. Thank you.
Thank you, David. If we're in the same situation as Wiltshire, Somerset and North Somerset, and we're in control of the BSIP, I'd happily sort out the bus routes ourselves. But unfortunately we're not. As you know, we have to work with Becca, which is a complicated and tricky situation at best. Right, moving on. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I've already spoken on various scrutiny panels about the issue of parking charges in Midsummer Norton, and I'm sure you're all aware of my comments about the ridiculous comparison between us and Keynsham and Bath economies, and the decades of neglect and lack of investment in our town. On one of these panels, I was interested to hear what felt to me like a bit of a pantomime with Councillor Rigby expressing her gratitude to Councillor Alton for his apparent parking survey and how residents would be happy to compromise of 2 hours free parking. So firstly, let's be absolutely clear. Councillors standing in car parks approaching people when they have time is not a survey. And it's dangerous for any council to even consider making important decisions based on this type of poor data, particularly when the decision impacts the livelihoods of so many people and businesses. As a minimum, Baines needs to complete a comprehensive parking survey structured around a random sample selection of motorists based on times of the day and days of the week. Also, an impact assessment on the local economy that involves talking to the local businesses. And only then will you be able to understand the consequences of your actions. So to me it's evident that this is purely about a short-term financial gain with no consideration to the risk to our high street. And if by some stroke of luck Councillor Alton is right and the majority of our residents would not pay as they park for less than 2 hours, then how on earth are you going to meet the £195,000 income declared in the budget? So obviously any free parking compromise will be short-lived. I would also urge Councillor Alton to look at his election leaflets where he claimed the Lib Dems had scrapped parking charges. It's strange how now the election's over, even less than a year later, there's a U-turn on this. To date, the council has tried selling our car park to a supermarket. There's been proposals to build houses on it, and now 2 attempts at parking charges. It's just time for this council to stop creating obstacles and start investing in our town. Just one final point, the proposal to introduce emissions-based charges using the climate emergency to justify an additional financial burden on the poorest in our society, those who rely on a car but can't afford the latest fuel-efficient cars or the latest electric vehicles. So I would just urge this Cabinet to reconsider this issue of parking charges in Midsummer Norton and Ladstock. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes, for your statement. Councillor Alton.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak to Cabinet today. When I was elected as a ward councillor, I was determined to do what I could to support the residents of Midsummer Norton. And I was surprised and disappointed to hear that the news that the council were considering introducing emission-based car parking charges at South Road Car Park. I worry about the impact that this will have on residents and on businesses and what steps we need to take to mitigate this. So I share some of the sympathies that Sean has been highlighting just now. Though I strongly disapprove of introducing the parking charges as a councillor, I do know that the challenge the council has in trying to face the financial shortfall it has at the moment and what impact this would have on vital services that we rely on as council taxpayers ourselves. And I have 3 requests that I would ask the Cabinet to consider. So rather than simply saying no to parking charges and campaigning on that basis, I wanted to understand what car park users felt about the issue and then explore a compromise and whether a compromise could be found. So over the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to 150 car park users in the car park over 5 different occasions, and also visited local businesses on the high street as well. And there is a strong feeling that the availability of free parking is vital to the economy of the town. In fact, 95% of people surveyed felt free parking was very important for Midsummer Norton, and it's clear that no one likes to pay for the idea of paying for their parking. I asked people how often they visited Midsummer Norton, how long they parked for, and their purpose for visiting the town. And over 85% of the people I spoke to, and it was just a chat rather than a full survey, were using the car park for shopping and leisure and staying for a relatively short period of up to 2 hours. And around 1 in 3 people lived locally and the rest travelled into Midsummer Norton from local communities. If parking charges must be introduced, and I will stress that I would prefer it wasn't, I am against car parking charges, then I'm asking you to consider 3 actions. One is that I'm asking today for firstly for 2 hours free parking which will help local businesses and to continue to be supported by those shoppers that come in for less than 2 hours. So 4 out of 5 people that I talked to felt that was a reasonable compromise. And I recognise that this could be reviewed as part of the TRO process further down. Secondly, that there was a real concern about what parking charges might mean for staff shortages or staff working in the shops in the high street. And many of our retailers are small independent shops with 1 or 2 staff, and I want to ensure that these businesses are protected. I urge the Cabinet to consider introducing a parking permit to support local businesses. It was done in Moreland Road when the resident parking zones were introduced, and it's vital that businesses in Midsummer Norton have the opportunity for additional help. There was a strong concern about emission-based charges, and I do share Councillor Hughes's views on that as well, in that pollution is not an issue in Midsummer Norton as it is in Bath. Looking around the car parks, I can see that we have more older vehicles that will incur higher car parking charges, and I strongly urge the Cabinet to reconsider emission-based charges. So in summary then, I understand the Cabinet must make some difficult decisions in this budget, but I ask if you have to bring in parking charges, that we agree to a 2-hour free parking, we discard the emission-based element of the parking charges, and we work with local businesses to introduce parking permits that will ensure that they can continue to thrive on our high street.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I was generous with 20 seconds there, so you don't ask for 20 seconds again. Well done, thank you. Right, last speaker, Councillor Eleanor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's a privilege to round up the statements, which I do think have a common theme to them, and I must congratulate Councillor Orton on agreeing with Councillor Hughes, and Councillor Hughes for agreeing with some points of Councillor Orton, which I would also support with regard to the situation in Radstock, where our economy is even more vulnerable and our traders much in need of the sort of permits that have been described. So, to get to the script. It is tempting to say, here we are again, waiting for a bus which may or may not turn up, whatever the lifetime board says at the bus stop. If, of course, you are lucky enough to be at a proper bus stop that has a lifetime board and a shelter and a seat, which you can meditate on, thinking about the promise of a better green future. I speak metaphorically, of course, because I have made the argument again and again for a budget provision for better public transport. But it's not just the little old ladies who are being excluded by what is proposed. It is also the children and young people who have no vote, no youth parliament anymore, may be living in unsuitable, overcrowded homes, and, believe it or not, have very little access to social media and computers. Indeed, from my experiences in the last few weeks, I fear we are creating 2 different societies, not the haves and the have-nots, but the internet-connected and those who, for one reason or another, cannot or will not use websites or cannot afford, like me, a smartphone. Whether one can summon up smoke and mirrors on Amazon or not, this budget is full of disconnects and logical flaws. But the main problems, as both Councillor Moss and Councillor Hardman have pointed out at scrutiny panels, is the failure to base decisions on up-to-date data and surveys of residents. Councillor Hardman asks whether you have really sat down and gone through the detail of your schemes and the impact that it will have on young people, and asked Youth Connect South West for solutions. The disconnected includes a democratic deficit, which the attempts to call in and dispute the livable neighbourhood orders amply demonstrates. Surely petitions against particular schemes with thousands of signatures, or even our Save the Royal Bus Services petitions with hundreds of names, should be shown more respect. And if there is one thing that canvassing in 5 successive Baines elections successfully has taught me, it is that our residents want a better deal for our young people. And I think it's deeply disappointed that these needs are not prioritised. To push back on 3S groups to pick up the slack in their charitable work and yet cut the grants and contracts to them is like Pharaoh requiring the children of Israel to make bricks without straw for his monuments. As I said before, do your homework properly, administration. Use your imagination. Write clear and legibly.
Councillor
And
Jackson.
don't blame others for a C+.
Well, splendid. Yeah. I give you 2 more seconds than Councillor Orton. They're overly generous. Yeah. Put the microphone back up. That's the end of public speakers. We'll move on. So, if public speakers want to leave now, you may quietly, and we'll get into the main business of the day. So, the minutes from the previous meeting on the 9th of November. Just ask the Cabinet to confirm they're a true record. Show of hands. Excellent. I'll sign them now. Right, consideration of single member items now requested to Cabinet, there are none. Consideration of matters referred to by Policy Development Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Moss, as Chair, would you like to give your report, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that everyone has seen the report produced as a consequence of the consultation with the scrutiny panels, and I think that the first of the resolutions is that the panel recognises the challenging financial circumstances faced by the Council and thanks officers for their work in developing a draft balanced budget. It's not the easiest of times. It's not easy because of the financial situation, and it's not easy when government appears to chop and change the amount of money that you can and can't get. And I appreciate that it is a bit of a moving feast that officers and Cabinet have had to deal with. But there were a number of proposals and a number of recommendations from panel members, and the first of that was to examine the potential downstream effects in response to its third sector budget proposals. And I have to say this is the one item that all panel members spoke on, all panel members expressed concern about, and across those party political divides was something that really concerned panel members. And I guess it is the headline, it is the major element of this budget that is generating, quite rightly, comment. There was also a request that home-to-school transport arrangements are subject to review to explore potential savings. I know that officers for a number of years have said that this is an issue that is under review. It would be good to see actually conclusions to the review rather than this is simply looked at. The corporate scrutiny panel is going to be scrutinising the income from the commercial estate, part of our work plan, and we'd certainly recommend that scrutiny to Cabinet, particularly looking at possible comparisons with peers or similar organisations to make sure that we are maximising income and opportunity, because it's not just about cash coming in, but opportunity from our commercial estate. And of course there was also asking Cabinet to examine the impact of parking income proposals for Radstock and Midsummer Norton and to update the climate emergency and sustainability panel. I know there's been statements about that this evening, and probably hopefully a chance to bring that up later. Can I go back to the first resolution, and that's the challenging financial circumstances and the changing financial circumstances? It's It would be very useful to panel members and backbenchers that as budget proposals change, that those variations be actually highlighted so that when we're looking at budget proposals we can see where those changes are on the budget lines, but also where the potential income is coming from. And if possible, some kind of spreadsheet like an Excel document so we can actually put things side by side. I just suggest that personally because trying to keep track of where we are with the budget is difficult. I only get announcements from the Honourable Michael Gove that there's extra money coming in or extra money being taken away. You do try to keep track of where those are. But those are the resolutions, the recommendations from the corporate scrutiny panel.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moss. Just make reference to the recommendations from the Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing PDS panel around the Community Resource Centres items as well. And we'll move on to recent single-member decisions taken by Cabinet there to be noted. And then item 12, the outcome and recommendations following the consultation on future delivery model for the Council's 3 Community Resource Centres. Councillor Bourne to move proposals, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to present this paper to Cabinet. It demonstrates our commitment to support the most vulnerable groups in our community, to make the best possible use of council resources, and to use those resources where they can add the most value and where the market has failed. The recommendations that I'm about to present take these factors into account. Our goal is to provide services locally wherever possible, which means that fewer people will be sent out of area. Providing services locally offers the advantages of maintaining links with family and friends, reduces costs, and makes it easier for us to stay in touch and monitor how placements are going. Before I go further, I want to thank our officers and staff who have worked so diligently to bring us to this point. This paper summarises the responses to the Community Resource Centre consultation undertaken between the 9th of November and the 18th of December 2023. It makes 5 recommendations that require approval by Cabinet. I'd like to thank our councillor colleagues on the Children and Adults Health and Wellbeing Policy Development and Scrutiny panel for their detailed engagement with this decision and for the useful debate we had at Monday's meeting. I'm pleased that scrutiny colleagues supported 4 of the 5 recommendations listed, and note there were mixed views on the future of Charlton House. Scrutiny colleagues supported the feasibility study for change of use of Charlton House, but some opposed the deregistration proposal. As the proposals are linked, these 2 positions are incompatible, and it's worth noting that. The consultation covered the 3 care homes that were taken back under council control in October 2020, namely Charlton House, Cleeve Court and Coombe Lee. There had been a lack of investment in these services for several years prior to the transfer back to the council. Significant work has been done since 2020 to increase staffing levels and to invest in pay, in training, in equipment and in the fabric of the buildings. As a consequence, the costs of running these services have increased considerably. And bless you, and now exceeds the costs of comparable services in the local market. Bath and North East Somerset is fortunate in that it benefits from a buoyant care home market with a good choice of provision for most needs. The areas that are less well provided for are in specialist dementia care and services for younger people with degenerative conditions and physical dependencies. This has become more of an issue following the recent closure of the local Leonard Cheshire care home. We also currently send a lot of people of all ages who have the most complex needs out of area because we do not have enough specialist education or care services within Bath and North East Somerset. One of the advantages of running our own in-house services is that it gives us the opportunity to use these facilities to fill gaps in the local market. We reached the decision to consult on potential changes to the use of these 3 care homes because we recognised that in providing standard residential and nursing beds for older adults, we were not doing this. Secondly, we were struggling to recruit staff, especially to nursing posts in Charlton House, which had led to quality issues. And also, we were not delivering best value on the services provided because they are in relatively small units that do not have the economies of scale of larger facilities. We can justify the cost of delivering care through our in-house services if they provide more specialist care, so it may make more sense to review whether we were making best use of these facilities and providing value for money for the council and for our residents. A review was undertaken in the summer of 2023. It focused on gaps in local provision, recruitment, affordability and value for money. Following the review of the three services, the proposals we consulted on were, firstly, to develop Cleeve Court Residential Home into a centre of excellence for dementia care, including nursing care. Secondly, to enhance our offer at Coombe Residential Home to enable younger people with more complex needs to remain closer to home. Thirdly, to close and deregister the remaining 10 places at Charlton House Nursing Home and then develop the site to provide alternative care provision and or housing options that would meet the needs of the local community now and into the future. And lastly, to offer community groups or charitable organisations use of the day centre spaces at the community resource centres at a reduced rental rate if the organisations were to offer services that were accessible to the care home residents and the community. We consulted on those proposals. The consultation was open to the general public and included meetings with staff and residents of the three homes and also with the relatives and friends of residents. The council received a total of 45 responses to the consultation. Over half, that's 53% of responses, were positive towards the overall proposals for the community resource centres. Nearly a third, 31%, disagreed and 16% were unsure. Some recommendations received more support than others. A full report on the outcomes of the consultation is attached to the report in Appendix 1. All responses were considered carefully, and some changes have been made to the recommendations in light of the feedback we received as follows. So the first recommendation is that we develop Cleeve Court Residential Home into a centre of excellence for dementia care without nursing. There were a number of reasons for this change to the original proposal as set out in the report. We are no longer proposing to change the registration at Cleeve Court from residential to nursing care. However, as we have an ageing population and we have an increasing number of people living with dementia, some of whom will need to receive support in residential settings as their condition progresses, it makes sense to develop this specialist centre. By developing Cleeve Court as a dementia facility, we will be better able to meet more complex needs, which will reduce the number of people who must move on to very costly dementia nursing placements and will provide a better service overall. The second recommendation is that there is no change to the original proposal to enhance our offer at Coombe Residential Home to enable younger people with more complex needs to remain closer to home. This was supported by more than 50% of respondents to the consultation, and there is evidence that intergenerational mixing can work well for both age groups. This change will reduce the need to send some residents out of area, which will enable them to maintain links with local friends and relatives and will allow for better monitoring of their progress. The third recommendation, to deregister the remaining 10 places in use at Charlton House Nursing Home and then develop the site to provide a residential school for young people with complex needs. A number of alternative uses were considered for the building, which is of good quality and was purpose-built for residential care. Given our lack of specialist residential schools within the authority, the costs, both financially and socially, of out-of-area placements and the pressures on our children's services budgets, it makes absolute sense to prioritise the building for this purpose. The needs of the current residents at Charlton House will be assessed individually and we will work closely with each resident and their families or representatives to determine suitable alternative placements and to ensure a smooth and safe transition. Staff affected by this change will be offered suitable alternative roles within the council. Where there are specialist roles like nurses, we will work with partners to identify suitable roles. I want to underline that suitable new places will be found nearby for the small number of residents for whom we will not be in a position to offer care, and there will be no change to the costs paid by any resident who is funding their own care. Recommendation 4. There is no change to the original proposal to offer community groups or charitable organisations use of the day centre spaces at the community resource centres at a reduced rental rate. This proposal was well supported and will help to reinstate the original purpose of the community resource centres. It will provide services that will meet the needs of both residents of the care homes and the local community, offering opportunities for social contact, support, respite and inclusion. And recommendation 5, this follows on from recommendation 3 and is to commence a full feasibility study in relation to the change of use for Charlton House to a special school with some residential provision. The development of the school will enable us to meet the needs of vulnerable young people within their local area, supporting close family ties and access to the local community, local friendships and local employment and training opportunities. The changes we recommend will enable us to optimise the use of these 3 council-owned buildings, which are of high quality and are purpose-built. The proposed changes will allow us to target the use of these facilities on the areas of greatest need. The changes will also deliver much-needed efficiencies and quality improvements in both adults and children's services. I ask that Cabinet approve the recommendations set out in 2.1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. Councillor May to second, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to second the proposal. I support all 5 recommendations which reflect our commitment to making the best use of council resources and to providing high-quality, cost-effective services to our residents. But I will focus my remarks on the 2 related recommendations regarding Charlton House that will enable us to better meet the needs of young people with complex needs. Charlton House has a long history in Keynsham, not only for its patients but its nearby elderly residents. Before any steps are taken, the needs of the remaining residents living in the home are of first importance. If agreed this evening, the proposed residential school for young people with complex needs will be an exciting opportunity to provide a facility that we are very short of in Baines. This would be a send and care facility for our local young people who currently have to travel outside of the Baines area to other providers, which is also more expensive. Of course, this has to be carefully worked through, including adapting the accommodation inside and out. Charlton House has bedrooms, 2 lounges, kitchens, offices and meeting rooms. These facilities need to be assessed with changes being made. There is funding from the DFE safety valve already in place for this work. We're not only thinking about residential spaces for children, but also respite facilities and continuing to work with the local community. Such new facilities will help families, kinship care for children, as well as less out-of-area travelling for those children. A step at a time. The needs of the residents must be taken care of as first, and I very much welcome Councillor Bourne's assurances that the Council will work closely with the current residents and their families and representatives to find suitable alternative placements. I also welcome a statement that the staff affected by this change will be offered other roles within the Council. Once this has happened, and then we have the opportunity to move forward with designing, planning and providing the new school in a sensitive way. I believe making the new provision to help these children, who, let's not forget, have some of the most challenging special needs in our community and disabilities, we will have a real asset to the Council and the local area in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Are you officially seconding?
I started off that way.
Yeah, brilliant.
Chair, I'd like to officially second that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Open to debate. Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief, but I would very much like to support these changes. I think that they're not. If it was just the financial aspect, then I would find it difficult to support them. But I think it's absolutely the right thing to do to bring bring services to the area for children and young people that we're currently sending out of area. I'm obviously pleased that financially that helps us as well, because financially sending children out of area is very expensive, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to do to provide facilities that the market isn't providing. The market is providing general needs, elderly care, and so that isn't in short supply. What is in short supply is children and young people's services, and that's what this will provide, so I'm very supportive.
Councillor Rigby?
Yeah, just to add, also incredibly supportive, and I'd like to thank both Councillor Vaughan and Councillor May and their respective officers. This is exactly what we should be doing as a council. We have council-owned assets, and we need to work cross-portfolio to make sure that we're having a joined-up proposal that makes the best use of the asset and delivers best for our residents. And I think this is an exemplar of doing that, so thank you.
Couldn't agree more. It's a prime example of collaborative work between adults and children's services to ensure we get the best facilities for the most vulnerable in our society. So well done. We'll move to the votes. All in favour of the paper? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item 13, revenue and capital budget monitoring, cash limits variations. Councillor Elliott to propose, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out how the Council is performing compared to budget for this year for both revenue and capital. Colleagues, I have no doubt remember that the last quarterly report at September month end was predicting that the Council would finish the year 6.5 million overspent on the revenue budget. At that meeting, I set out the recovery plans we intended to put in place. For example, reducing discretionary spend, holding staff posts vacant, maximising external funding. I'm very pleased to report that those plans are working. The headline figure is that at the end of December we are predicting a £1.84 million overspend now, so the trend is significantly downwards. The main areas of ongoing overspend are the ones we've become used to hearing about. Pressures on children's services generally and on home-to-school transport in particular mean that this service is currently forecast to overspend by £4.47 million. On the flip side, really encouraging levels of visitor numbers to Bath have meant both heritage and highway services income are predicted to be significantly up on budget expectations, and higher interest rates and reprofiled borrowing means that our capital financing costs are lower than expected. Of the 14.4 million in savings identified in the 23-24 budget, 10.3 million are showing as forecast to be delivered, with the remainder either mitigated through alternative measures or included as unachievable in the service forecasts. So I want to congratulate all council officers on their efforts to reduce the overspend position. It's a fantastic effort. But we do still have a 1.84 million gap to close, and senior directors will continue to focus on mitigation plans throughout the final quarter to try to bring us back into balance by the end of the year. With regard to capital spend, we're currently looking at spending 52.3 million less than we expected on a capital budget of 133 million. Whilst this is not necessarily brilliant news, as it means various capital schemes are being delivered more slowly than forecast, it obviously means that we have less pressure on our borrowing. We're currently predicting that the Council's share of council tax income will be 220,000 more than expected, but the business rate income is looking like it'll be down by 680,000, so that's a 460,000 net under budget on income. The Council's general reserves are steady at 12.6 million, which is within our accepted prudent levels to be able to manage any unexpected financial pressure. So overall, this is a positive report, starting from a pretty negative position, but I commend again all the hard work that has gone into bringing the Council's revenue budget back in line, and I move the recommendations in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.4.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Roper, a second.
Yes, thank you, Chair. No statement, but happy to second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roper. We'll move to the debate on the current budget. No. Move to the vote. All in favour? That is passed unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll go from the current budget to the proposed budget for Council Tax 24-25 and Financial Outlook. Councillor Elliott, to move, please.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet colleagues, this...
Sorry, I apologise, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Robin Moss, yes, as a non-executive councillor, does have the right to make a statement. Yes, Councillor Moss.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving the opportunity to make a statement. I'll be brief because the main debate will be taking place in about 10 days' time. But just wanted to just offer a couple of comments on the budget papers as are appearing today. First of all, thanks to officers for the work they're doing in the context that they're working in. I suppose the Labour Group has concerns about the sustainability of the budget, and there's a couple of ways to actually judge sustainability. First of all is to look at previous years and how that spend comes out over the quarters, and clearly we've just dealt with that. It is clearly a better position to be 1.8 million down in quarter 3 than 6.5 in quarter 2, but that is still an overspend, and that is still, although that's the global picture, that is still variation across particular budget heads. But the second way to judge, of course, is what the internal audits are actually telling us. And as you do, I was reading the Corporate Audit Committee papers for yesterday evening, and it is worrying that in item 9 of the quarterly audit committee, that there are plans to actually postpone a whole series of internal audits, including climate emergency and elements of the corporate estate. I'd certainly urge Cabinet to make sure that internal work actually does take place. The second bit is, and coming back to a theme that I guess that I've brought up over a number of years, the Department for Unforeseen Consequences, and in particular making sure that any decisions that are taken, first of all, don't jeopardise any future income, and secondly, don't create demand and costs further down the line. And I think there are elements within this budget that actually do that, and probably the best example of that are the proposed cuts to the third sector, that the potential loss of income from other sources, that the leverage that comes from funding is something that needs to be audited and be looked at. And I think we've also heard about how potentially we'll end up having to deal with more homelessness issues further down the line, and that is potential cost. And I know in talking to officers over the last couple of weeks as part of the opposition budget preparation, that the number of vacancies for people that are homeless, the number of voids that are coming up, I think have dropped from something like 800 to 500 at any point. And clearly the cost, as we're seeing for homelessness, that putting people up in hotels or bed and breakfasts means that we can't recoup all that money from central government. So just making those two elements about the sustainable budget and the consequence of future decisions, and I'm sure that I, along with many other people, will have more to contribute on the 20th of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Back to Councillor Elliott to propose, please.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet colleagues, this budget has quite obviously been one of the most difficult that the Council has had to pull together. We started from a position a few months ago of a 16.42 million funding gap, with massive increase in costs and demand in social care, particularly in children's social care, the cost of living crisis meaning increased cost for things like energy and the consequent pressure on wage increases. This really is a perfect storm. We've been debating the budget contents over those intervening months, And I know we've had robust but always constructive discussions about the shape it should take. This is as it should be. A bit of creative tension is always valuable. Where we've landed is actually quite remarkable given the massive turmoil in local government finance. I am able to propose to you a paper which sets out a balanced revenue budget not just for next financial year but for the following financial year as well. The stability this provides the Council, the ability to plan, is one that many councils across the country will, I'm sure, envy. This is a fantastic achievement, and I want to thank all of you and all of the officers for their hard work over the past few months. One of the things that makes planning extremely difficult is the panicky, haphazard way that central government deals with the funding settlement to council. In that light, I need to draw to your attention the supplement to the main paper. You will be aware that the government announced a couple of weeks ago that it intended to offer an additional last-minute, one-off extra grant for social care in the next financial year. We eventually got the actual details of that grant on Tuesday of this week, and as you will see, it provides roughly an extra 1.5 million in one-off social care funding next year. Whilst this is of course welcome, it is nothing more than a sticking plaster over the gaping wound that is social care funding. It seems to be a last-ditch, desperate and cynical attempt to try and get some of those councils which are in very serious and immediate financial difficulty. I'm happy to reiterate that we're not one of those. But it appears to be an effort to get them to limp through to the next general election and to make it the next government's problem. It addresses none of the underlying systemic issues in the social care funding sector, and it does nothing to help with the long-term stability of local authorities. However, as I say, it is obviously welcome nonetheless, and we propose allocating the extra funds into reserves split between adults and children's social care in proportion to the size of their budgets. These funds will then be available to mitigate the risk of overspend in those portfolios in the coming year. And you have a supplemental report which amends the budget, which I will be proposing as part of this statement at the end. I want to talk further about the social care elements of the budget. Unlike our Tory central government, we recognise the need to adequately fund the care of the most vulnerable in society. And so we are proposing a net increase in the adult social care budget of just under 1.7 million and in the children's social care budget of nearly £4 million. Our commitment to the most needy and vulnerable residents is absolutely clear. I want to recognise that over the public consultation process and through the PDS panels and again here this evening, our third sector partners have raised significant concern about the proposed savings to our community contracts. Our total spend on these type of contracts is about 9.3 million. And the contracts haven't been looked at properly for some time. There are something like 77 separate services being commissioned. So it's reasonable to expect that savings can be made, and I think our third sector partners agree that that's the case. However, I completely hear the concern that a sudden drop in funding would be damaging and doesn't leave time for those contracts to be properly and carefully reviewed. The budget proposal has therefore been adjusted to spread the savings in adult social care over 2 years rather than expecting the savings to come all at once. And I wrote to the third sector providers on Tuesday evening to reassure them that we do not wish to impose arbitrary savings on them. We want to work with them to undertake a proper review and to mutually agree a way forward based on maintaining those services which are preventing increased, more costly demand coming into statutory social care services further down the line. I finished my letter by saying that the atrocious lack of adequate central government financial support for social care means that we are having to have these difficult conversations, but I would like to reassure you that we view you as valued partners in supporting the needs of our most vulnerable residents, and we look forward to working with you on meeting the difficult financial challenges we face. I hope that reassures those third sector partners that we really do value their work and we will work with them, not inflict things on them. I will talk in more length about other areas of the budget proposal when it's brought to full council later in the month. But I just want to highlight the fact that despite the general financial doom and gloom, on top of the vital work of protecting the most vulnerable in society, and in contrast to many councils across the country, we have been able not just to tread water, but to really pursue our ambitious manifesto commitments to the people of Bath and North East Somerset. This is partly due to the huge success we have seen with the tourist trade in the City of Bath, bouncing back to pre-pandemic levels much more quickly than expected. The Roman baths are performing fantastically. Income from things like parking and the park and ride services in the city are well up on expectations, and vacancy levels in the council's commercial property portfolio are well below national averages. I'm delighted with the way we've managed these assets, which has helped to alleviate some of the huge pressure from other areas. In passing this budget proposal, we will be able to protect our spending on the climate emergency action, increase our revenue spend on the Clean and Green initiative to make sure it has solid long-term funding base, progress with our plan to build hundreds of new social housing homes, massively increase our capital spending on local highway improvements, providing many more new crossings, highway safety and cycling schemes, progress plans for the new Fashion Museum, which will be a very major new asset to the City of Bath, use community infrastructure levy funding to fund 20 community projects, use money raised from the Clean Air Zone to start a hugely exciting and long-planned Scholars Way cycling and pedestrian route from Combe Down to St Martin's Garden in Odd Down. I think we can be very proud of the ambition that this budget sets out, despite the parlous overall state of local government finance. It protects the most vulnerable, delivers on our manifesto commitments, and sets out a firm foundation for the future of the Council. I move the recommendations in paragraph 2.1 to 2.5 of the report, including the supplemental amendment paper E3500.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Warren to second.
So as we've already heard, local government around the country is facing challenges in managing intense pressures on budgets from mounting inflation and rising demand for our services. The pressures on spending, particularly in social care, one of our statutory services accounting for a large proportion of our overall budget, are enormous. This means that for those areas of the Council's work that are discretionary, meaning it is our choice to do them, such as green transformation, it is harder and harder to carve anything at all from the pie. In that context, I am happy to report that in Bath and North East Somerset's proposed budget for next year, we will sustain levels of funding to support our corporate priorities to tackle the climate and ecological emergencies over the course of the current administration. There is good news in that we are just getting to the point of having recruited to the new posts that we were awarded in budget setting this time last year in green transformation and sustainable transport, and we are really starting to see the extent of what we will be able to deliver with the new team in post. In that context, we will be increasing our work with communities to raise awareness and support local action for climate and nature. Across green transformation and sustainable transport, we have a strong track record of successful bids to government and external agencies for funding, and as a result we have a healthy programme of work ahead on our net zero nature positive goals, looking to reduce carbon emissions from buildings and power, enable real choice of alternatives to the car and support nature recovery. On energy, we will be investing in renewable energy and heating infrastructure on the council estate, contributing to our 12 megawatt target for council-generated renewables, including, amongst other examples, air source heat pumps planned for cars, wood and connections daycare centres. We'll be working with partners to develop new renewables projects, contributing to our district-level targets of an additional 300 megawatts generating capacity by 2030. We're working with the West of England Combined Authority and with local partners to support the scale-up of energy-efficient retrofit activity across the district, helping make homes cheaper to heat and to relieve the cost of living pressures for residents. We're working with partners around the West of England on local area energy planning, and with Bath and West Community Energy and other partners to promote homeowner action on retrofit through our recent Green Open Homes event and our local energy advice demonstrator project on heritage retrofit. In terms of supporting nature, we are implementing biodiversity net gain, or we are consulting on potentially implementing, we are already implementing biodiversity net gain, but we're consulting on improving that through the planning system. We're allocating £310,000 in SIL funding to support work across a range of green infrastructure projects, including Bathscape, Summer Valley Rediscovered, Chew Valley Reconnected, Bath River Line Water Space and Cambridge Memorial Park. We're allocating capital to allow replacement of street trees and trees lost to ash dieback, and developing a tree and woodland strategy to map out how we can continue our work to double tree coverage. On sustainable transport, we are working on delivery of significant improvements in public transport infrastructure through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, focusing in particular on key transport corridors from the rural and outlying areas into the city, and also on cycling and walking projects in and around the city. We're developing an active travel master plan to help shape and inform future rollout of active travel infrastructure. Working with the combined authority to develop and deliver electric vehicle charging points across the district. And as Councillor Elliott mentioned, earmarking £2 million of our Clean Air Zone income reserve to commence the build-out of the long-awaited Scholars Way cycle route, which will link educational establishments with neighbourhoods across the south of Bath, as well as funding to improve pedestrian safety around the district in support of our recent Vision Zero declaration. In addition, we have been able to allocate further funding that will allow us to increase our capacity to develop active travel projects and attract further investment in sustainable local transport infrastructure. So, I think in summary, despite a dire picture nationwide for local government and amidst extremely difficult decisions that we have had to take across the board of council activities, our officers are to be applauded for finding imaginative ways to continue to fund progress against our corporate priority of tackling the climate and nature emergency, whilst continuing to deliver day-to-day for our residents. And on that basis, I'm happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Move to the debate. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, obviously, recognising that the government has been cutting local authorities fairly aggressively over the last 10 years, I wanted to pay my respects to Councillor Elliott, who's worked extremely hard with officers to try and deal with the consequences of that. And I'm very grateful that he has listened to our pleas about the third sector and has found a way to smooth any savings out through a more considered process into next year. And I think what we've heard here this evening is kind of the difficult challenge we have. We have our third sector partners literally intervening to keep people in their homes and not presenting to us as homeless and whacking up our temporary accommodation costs, and literally intervening in people's homes to keep them in their homes. We've heard about how we need to maximise the resources we do have, and yet we have a group of residents who don't want to pay to park in council car parks. You know, and it's one of those difficult positions we find ourselves in. But I think from what we've heard, some of the concerns we've heard, I think Councillor Elliott has made a huge effort, and I'm sure other Cabinet members will be, to try and address some of the concerns we've heard. Because I think the government has cut local authority budgets because it didn't think anyone cared. So cutting our discretionary spend from 30 million in 2013 to 800,000 last year, because they don't really think anybody cares about local authorities. And yet what we've heard tonight is that people are starting to care. But I'm afraid that the days of something for nothing are over. And as much as you'd like to have more money, the fact is, if you don't want to see homeless people on the street, if you do want to see regular buses, and if you do want to be able to park for free in council car parks, then don't vote Conservative at the next election. But I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I'd just like to give my thanks to Councillor Elliott and the officers. They've done an exceptional job in ridiculously difficult circumstances. And it's a general plea from this Cabinet and probably from the Council next week that central government would, and hopefully there will be a change in government, will look seriously at how funding flows down to vital local authorities. We provide services to the most vulnerable in our society, and we can't do that without a fundamental review, particularly in social care, of how we receive funding. So I plea any future government to have a complete review of how they fund local government, because we can't do the job that we want to do unless they provide us with the money to do it. Right, we will move to the vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We will move to the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. Councillor Elliott to move, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the framework for managing the Council's cash balances. Given the economic uncertainty, the Council takes a very prudent approach to its investments. Section 4 of Appendix 1 sets out the Treasury Management indicators which express that prudent approach, setting out our borrowing limits, credit risk, liquidity, interest rate risk, refinancing risk and long-term investment risk. As at the 31st of December, our total borrowing stood at just under 216 million and our total cash investments at just over 39 million, leaving a net debt position of just under 178 million. I'd like to commend the excellent work of the Council's corporate finance team, and we benchmark very well in terms of Treasury performance, and I'm entirely confident in the skill and expertise we have in Treasury management and the skill and expertise they display. I move the recommendations in paragraphs 2.1 and 2.2 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCabe, second.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this, and once again, tremendous effort by officers to keep on top of this, and thanks to Councillor Elliott as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I'll move to the debate. Councillor Rigby, please. So I hadn't moved to the vote yet, you see. Yeah, you're getting excited. Move to the vote, please. All in favour? That is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Move on to Treasury Management Performance Report, 30th December 2023. Councillor Elliott to move again, please.
Me again. My final report for this meeting sets out the Treasury Management performance against the current Treasury Management strategy. The CITFA Code of Practice specifies we must do this every quarter. In summary, our average return on investments is 4.8%, 4.87% on short-term investment and 4.48% on long-term investment, which is slightly below our benchmark of 4.88%, but above the budgeted rate, which was 3.75% for short-term investments. So we're outperforming that by 1.12%, and the benchmark rate for long-term investments was 4%, so we're outperforming that by just under half a percentage point. Our return on our long-term environmental, social and governance funds is giving a good, steady return at 4.52%. On the borrowing side, our borrowing at the 31st of December, as I said, sat at just under 217 million. Very little changed from the previous quarter's report, with borrowing reduced by just over £1 million in total. With rates high, our current approach remains to borrow only when absolutely necessary. One loan for 10 million, which was at 4.5%, had an option for the lender to increase rates in October. They were proposing to increase to 5.88%, so this loan was repaid, and two new loans of 5 million each were taken out during the quarter with the Public Works Loan Board at an average of 4.58%, so only slightly above the rate that those loans were at previously. Overall, our team's careful Treasury management is currently predicted to result in a 2.18 million underspend on budget, which is obviously going to help towards mitigating the in-year budget pressures. I commend the report to Cabinet and move the recommendation in 2.1 and 2.2.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCabe, to second, please.
Yes, very happy to second this, and at the risk of fanboying Councillor Elliott, I refer you to the remarks I made previously.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Now, Councillor Rigby, calm down. Debate, anybody? Move to the vote. All in favour? Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Right, the last paper of the evening is Quarter 3, 23-24, Corporate Strategic Performance Report. Councillor Wood to move, please.
I move as tabled, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rigby to second, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am very happy to second the report. I would like to say just a few words, if I may. I'd particularly like to highlight how committed we are as a Liberal Democratic administration to reporting back on performance in this way, and we aim to progressively make these reports more and more useful and easy to understand as this culture gets embedded within the Council. This means reporting back on more indicators and strategies as time goes on. I'd also like to see in the future reporting back on some of the practical things the Council does. For example, last month the Highways team produced an excellent video with a selection of stats relating to the incredible volume of work our teams and contractors carried out on the highways last year. For example, almost 21,000 gullies were inspected and almost 18,000 were cleaned. We have teams delivering absolutely fantastic work in every department of the Council, and these are the sort of achievements in the future I'd like to see brought to the fore. Sharing updates on how things are going in a regular and transparent manner not only means residents can hold the Council to account, but also underlines our commitment to giving people a bigger say, as all our communication needs to go both ways. Very happy to second.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. Move to debate. All in favour? That is unanimous. That just leaves me to thank everyone for attending and their comments, and everyone online for watching. I will officially close the meeting. Thank you very much.